When I look out here across the opening to the Strait of Hormuz, especially at nighttime when they have their lights on, I see dozens of ships waiting for what they hope would be a safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. There might be over 100 ships waiting here, and on the other side, inside the Persian Gulf, hundreds of ships are waiting to somehow make their way through what has become a very perilous passage through the Strait of Hormuz. All of this brought about by Iranian threats that they would attack any ship that is in any way affiliated with the United States or Israel or any of its allies. But maritime and trade data platforms do show that some ships get through. 89 ships altogether since the start of the war have got through the Strait of Hormuz. So who does get through? Well, first of all, out of those 89 ships, 1/5 are affiliated with Iran. There are also ships that are affiliated with India and Pakistan that have managed to make their way during wartime through the Strait of Hormuz, and other ships have been heading to China. But essentially, the situation that all of these ships are facing is that Iran right now is deciding who gets through the Strait of Hormuz safely and who gets threatened with possible attacks.
For months, Iran played its one remaining card with ruthless precision. Its military had been gutted. Its air defenses had been shredded, its missile stockpiles had been reduced to rubble, but the Strait of Hormuz, that narrow, 31-mile choke point connecting the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman, the bottleneck through which 20 million barrels of oil flow every single day, that Iran still owned. Or so the regime believed. Fast boats operated by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps have been terrorizing commercial shipping in that strait for weeks. Drones launched from Iranian soil have struck vessel after vessel. At least 16 commercial ships attacked, 8 people killed, 1 still missing. And the results have been devastating, not just for the ships trying to make the crossing, but for the entire global economy. Where 1,129 vessels transited the Strait of Hormuz during the first half of this same period last year, only 77 have dared to make the crossing in the first half of March 2026. That's roughly 1/16 of normal traffic. Oil prices are climbing, markets are nervous, and Iran has been watching from behind its IRGC patrol boats, smiling. That smile is about to vanish. On March 14th, multiple major outlets, including the BBC, reported that the United States was sending additional warships in the direction of Iran. Now, on the surface that sounds familiar. The US has been surging naval power into the region for weeks, and carrier deployments have already translated into devastating airstrikes against Iranian infrastructure. More ships have typically meant more strikes. But what's heading toward Iran right now is something fundamentally different, something the regime never prepared for, something that doesn't just threaten to add to the airstrike count. It threatens to change the entire character of this conflict overnight. The USS Tripoli is leading an amphibious ready group toward the Middle East, and it's bringing the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit with it. Let that sink in for a moment, because this changes everything. An amphibious ready group is not a standard naval formation. It isn't just firepower at sea. The structure of an ARG is purpose-built for one thing above all others: getting soldiers onto hostile shores. A standard ARG includes an assault ship, 2 transport docks, and a support vessel, and embarked within that flotilla is a Marine Expeditionary Unit of at least 2,200 Marines. The New York Times is now reporting that approximately 2,500 Marines are currently en route to the Middle East aboard this formation. These are not support troops. These are not logistical personnel. These are America's Rapid Reaction Force, the unit that military commanders call when the problem on the ground cannot be solved from the air. The War Zone, one of the most respected military analysis outlets in the business, confirmed that this deployment wasn't just ordered up through the normal chain of command. U.S. Central Command received direct approval from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth himself to send this group. That level of sign-off tells you something. This isn't routine. This is deliberate. This is escalatory. And this is being ordered from the very top of the American military command structure. The USS Tripoli was spotted approaching the Bashi Channel, the passage that runs between Taiwan and the Philippines, on March 12th. The day before, On March 11th, sailors aboard the ship had conducted live fire exercises that U.S. Indo-Pacific Command photographed and shared publicly, playing the drills off as routine. Maybe they were. But 2 days later, the world learned that the ship was steaming toward the Middle East at what open-source intelligence analysts described as an unusually high speed. Satellite imagery shows a wake large enough to confirm that this ship is not taking a leisurely cruise. It is moving with intent. Even at that pace, the journey from its home base in White Beach, Okinawa, Japan to the Middle East will take another week or two, but that timeline doesn't diminish the headline. The Marines are coming. And here is where it gets really interesting and really alarming for Tehran, because the USS Tripoli and its 2,500 Marines may only be the beginning. Open-source intelligence analyst Ian Ellis has flagged on X that the U.S. has additional amphibious-ready groups positioned in the Pacific that could be redirected toward Iran at any moment. Task Force Ashland is currently stationed in Thailand. The USS Arlington, another amphibious warship, was observed on March 1st conducting repeated loading operations out of Norfolk, Virginia, surrounded by armed security boats. Now, nobody is saying definitively that those operations were preparation for a Hormuz deployment. But when you're running drills that simulate the exact conditions your ship would face in one of the world's most contested waterways, you don't need a classified briefing to connect the dots. Ellis also points out that 3 additional ARGs, the Iwo Jima, the Boxer, and the Kearsarge, are all currently positioned where they could join the USS Tripoli's group should the order come down from Washington. What the United States may be assembling, quietly and methodically, is the most significant Marine deployment in the Middle East in years. But before we get into what these Marines might actually do when they arrive, it's worth understanding exactly what a Marine Expeditionary Unit is, because the answer tells you a great deal about why Iran should be losing sleep right now. The New York Times has described Marine Expeditionary Units as America's 9-to-1 force, and that framing is more precise than it might initially sound. These are the units you call when something urgent needs to be solved fast, when air power alone isn't enough, and when the situation on the ground demands human presence. The history of how MEUs have been deployed backs this up entirely. When the United States went into Afghanistan in October of 2001, the very first conventional U.S. ground force to put boots on Afghan soil was the 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit. Not Army Rangers, not Special Forces, Marines. MEUs are, by design, the spearhead. They go first, they go fast, and they go self-sustained. The structure of a Marine Expeditionary Unit is built around 4 core elements. The command element serves as the operational brain of the unit, coordinating all deployed forces. The ground combat element is the MEU's heavy hitter, a Marine infantry battalion complete with artillery support, reconnaissance assets, engineers, and amphibious vehicles specifically designed to land troops on enemy-controlled shores. Then there's the aviation combat element, which brings a medium helicopter squadron along with a mix of transport aircraft, fighter jets, attack helicopters, and air defense systems. And finally, the logistics combat element handles transportation, supplies, equipment, maintenance, and medical support. This is not a small strike force. This is a self-contained, multi-domain military organism capable of operating independently in a hostile environment for an extended period. And here's the detail about the USS Tripoli specifically that makes Iran's fast boat strategy look increasingly desperate. The Tripoli has been designed with a specific secondary capability that most amphibious assault ships lack. It can be converted into what military analysts call an F-35 Lightning carrier. That means the USS Tripoli isn't just a platform for getting Marines ashore. It can function as a floating airbase capable of launching one of the most advanced stealth fighter jets on the planet directly into the airspace above the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian fast boats, which have been operating with relative impunity under the assumption that the U.S. posture in the strait is primarily naval, are now looking at the potential arrival of F-35s operating from a ship that can park itself in the strait and dare the IRGC to do something about it. CBS News reported on March 15th that one of the U.S. military's primary objectives right now is wresting control of the Strait of Hormuz from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Secretary of Defense Hegseth addressed this directly at a press conference on March 13th, saying that the only reason the strait isn't open right now is because Iran is shooting at shipping. He added that the U.S. is already dealing with those attacks and made clear that Washington is not going to allow the Strait of Hormuz to remain what he called contested.
As we often do here at the Department of War, with the bottom line up front, for the world to hear and the press to actually admit that the United States is decimating the radical Iranian regime's military in a way the world has never seen before. Never before has a modern, capable military, which Iran used to have, been so quickly destroyed and made combat ineffective, devastated. We said it would not be a fair fight, and it has not been. As I stated during our first press conference on day 2, that was 10 short days ago, the combination of the world's 2 most powerful air forces is unprecedented and unbeatable. Between our air force and that of the Israelis, over 15,000 enemy targets have been struck. That's well over 1,000 a day. No other combination of countries in the world can do that. So today, as we speak, we fly over the top of Iran and Tehran. Fighters and bombers all day, picking targets as they choose. As our intelligence gets better and better and more refined. Looking up, the IRGC and Iranian regime sees only 2 things on the side of aircraft: the stars and stripes and the Star of David. The evil regime's worst nightmare. Iran has no air defenses. Iran has no air force. Iran has no navy. Their missiles, their missile launchers, and drones being destroyed or shot out of the sky. Their missile volume is down 90%. Their one-way attack drones yesterday, down 95%. And as the world is seeing, they are exercising sheer desperation in the Straits of Hormuz. Something we're dealing with. We have been dealing with it, and don't need to worry about it. We're on plan to defeat, destroy, disable all of their meaningful military capabilities at a pace the world has never seen before.
There is, he said, a plan. He didn't say what it is, but the plan is in motion. So what might that plan actually look like? The most immediate and least provocative option is using the 31st MEU in a security and escort capacity, essentially inserting a rapid response force into the strait that can conduct search and rescue operations for vessels that come under Iranian attack. When an Iranian fast boat or drone strikes a commercial ship, having Marines on amphibious craft nearby means the U.S. can put personnel aboard a stricken vessel quickly, stabilize the situation, and evacuate crew members before the IRGC can exploit the chaos. It's not the most dramatic use of a Marine expeditionary unit, but it changes the calculus for Iran's naval commanders immediately, because now every fast boat attack risks triggering a direct confrontation with U.S. Marines, not just a retaliatory airstrike hours later. The next option, and arguably the more consequential one, involves the islands. Iran controls more than 30 islands in and around the Persian Gulf, and several of them have been functioning as forward operating bases for the IRGC's Strait of Hormuz campaign. These are the launching points for the fast boats and the drone operations that have choked off commercial shipping. The U.S. has already destroyed 16 of Iran's mine-laying vessels, according to U.S. Central Command. But destroying vessels is different from denying the IRGC access to the physical territory it needs to sustain the campaign. Amphibious landings on strategic IRGC islands would do exactly that. The 31st MEU has the equipment, the training, and the firepower to assault those islands, neutralize missile batteries and drone launch sites, and either hold that territory or destroy the infrastructure before withdrawing. Gulf News has already noted that this deployment could give the Pentagon the ability to do precisely this: launch raids on the Persian Gulf islands that underpin Iran's entire Hormuz strategy.